Hi everyone. So in this video we'll discuss basics of Docker. So this video is for absolute beginners who are getting started with Docker. So the agenda for this video is what exactly is Docker and why use Docker. We'll also discuss about Docker image and Docker containers, and we'll try to understand the behind of scenes. So whenever we run this command Docker run hello world, and we'll also discuss about namespacing and control groups. So let's begin. So whenever we hear this word Docker, there are two important questions that comes into our mind. First is what is Docker and why? What is the use of Docker? Why do we need Docker? So in this video, we'll try to answer these two questions in detail. Suppose you are trying to install a software, and what you will download installer from internet, then you will be running this installer, and many times you get errors while running an installer, and you troubleshoot the issue, then you rerun the installer, and until you are able to successfully install the software, you keep on running this process. So this is what Docker is trying to fix. So let's see how Docker is fixing this problem. Docker makes it really easy to install and run software without worrying about any setup or dependencies. And Docker is a platform, or you can say an ecosystem around creating and running containers. So in a Docker ecosystem, we have many things like Docker client, Docker server, Docker machine, Docker hub, Docker images, and Docker compose. And we will discuss about all these ecosystem in detail in later part of the video. So first and the foremost thing, whenever we try to create a container, so we'll have to write a image. So what exactly is image? Image is a single file with all the dependencies and config that are required to run a program. And when we run an image, it creates a container. What is a container? Container is then running instance of the image. So container is the running program, right? So you create images, and when you run the images, it creates multiple containers on your requirement, right? So Docker has two parts, Docker client and Docker server. Docker client is something where we run the command. So Docker client is the CLI that we use to give command so that the Docker server can create images, run containers, etc. So now, if you do not have Docker, so how would you get started? So the first thing you'll have to do is go to docker.com and sign up for Docker Hub account. Docker Hub account is kind of a repository where you have lots of images. So the first thing is to download, install Docker for your machine. If you are using Mac, then install it for that. If you have Windows machine, select that version. And after you have installed Docker in your local machine, log into Docker and verify Docker installation. And now the question is, once you have installed the Docker, how would you confirm if the Docker installation is successful? So we generally run this program, Docker run hello world. So we run this program in Docker client, and Docker client internally communicates with Docker server, and like it try to find out this hello dash world image. If this image is available in your local machine, it will fetch the image and run that image and create a container. Otherwise, the Docker server will communicate with the Docker hub, which is the repository of the images that people create. So if the image doesn't exist in your local cache, then it will communicate with the Docker Hub and try to find the image. It will pull the image and run the image for you. Now let's go in detail. Why do we need Docker basically? So suppose you have a laptop and you are running multiple softwares on your laptop. Suppose you are running Chrome, you are running any terminal, Spotify, or any Node.js application. So how like a, basic computer works. So whenever you run a software, it will give system calls to kernel, and kernel will communicate with your hardware, which consists of CPUs, memories, and hard disk. So these running programs issues request to kernel to interact with a piece of software, piece of hardware in your laptop or computer, right? This is how software works. But suppose there is a scenario where you have two different softwares that have separate different dependencies. Suppose Chrome needs Python version 2 and Node.js requires Python version 3. But how would you manage that? Because if you install Python, it will be either your it'll have one version of your Python. There are use cases, there are possibilities you can install multiple versions of Python, but ideally it will try to remove other existing versions before installing a new one. So how would you solve this problem of different softwares trying to have different dependency to run the program? So this is where Docker comes into picture. So as we discussed about containers, like we in the uh, earlier part of the PPT, we were discussing about container. So this is the container that gets created. A container is an isolated piece of your computer. It like uses the piece of your resources or your CPU, memory, and etc. And it will create an isolated environment where you can execute your program that have dependencies inside the container only, right? Now, these things are pretty easy, but now what exactly this namespacing and control groups? Namespacing, using namespacing, we can isolate resources per process or a group of processes. And using control groups, we can limit amount of resources used per process. So there's a container gets created which have your required Chrome software, and this container will have portions of each resources that your laptop has. It will have the hard drive portion of RAM, portion of CPU, network, etc. And this environment is a very isolated environment. It will not communicate with other containers. And whenever you will try to run this application, and suppose you want to run Chrome, so you'll run this command, run Chrome. So it will run the container with their existing resources. So this is what Docker provides. Docker provides multiple containers that have their own resources to run a piece of software with their dependencies. Linux, Docker uses Linux virtual machine, and this virtual machine can have n number of containers. You do not there is no restriction in the number of containers as long as you have resources to run them, right? And these are the containers. They are isolated piece of software. They do not interact. Like they interact, but that's a different story. We'll talk about those instances in later part of the video. So in your computer we can run a number of containers, and these are the advantages of Docker, so that you can run many softwares with their own dependencies. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope after watching this video you have some better understanding of Docker like basics, and in the later videos we'll try to dig more into the Docker. Thanks for watching guys. Thank you.